Now joining us for our news review program is Sakina Datu, journalist and writer from London, and Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us out of Bristol. I'd like to welcome you both to the program. Hello to the two of you. Sakina, we're going to start with you, Sakina. Just as far as seizing this critical crossing, the most critical, the Rafah crossing, over 3 weeks now, and then you could, considering the offensive that's been launched now on the city of Rafah, that the tent and camp massacre the other day, knowing that the Gazans are desperate, in need of evacuations right now, medicine. I mean, just when you think that the regime cannot get any more brutal and conduct itself in more of a horrific fashion, it does something like this to just basically challenge your own imagination, for that matter. Your initial thoughts, please.
I think it is unbelievable, honestly, that the world, what kind of world we live in. The more every time you think that this is the worst you've seen, we only see things getting worse. I mean, for America, for example, to be saying that it hasn't, red line hasn't been crossed, and therefore they are not going to stop arms selling or giving to Israel. What else? What is the red line? What else do they need to see? We have seen children's bodies, beheaded. This is something that is going around in the world and people are watching it. Burnt bodies of babies. If this is not the red line, then what is going to be the red line? Pregnant women are starving in a modern era of today, where borders are so easily crossable. To conduct this kind of atrocities, it just boggles the mind, to be honest. But then on the other hand, we also know that the oppressors, they tend to do the maximum damage just before they go down. So I mean, this is probably the worst, but the biggest sign that this is an end. Israel is going to fall so badly on its feet, and at this stage, the fact that they are going all out in ensuring a crazy ethnic cleansing that they are committing, this means that the days are really numbered, and we will see a fall very, very soon.
Thank you, Sakina. And I'd like to welcome Tony Gosling to the conversation. Hello, Tony. Tony, Majid Ramadan, the Palestinian the minister, the health minister, said that the only way that Rafah crossing is going to get opened if there is basically global pressure, most possibly from Washington, put on the regime in Tel Aviv, considering the dire humanitarian catastrophe that is unfolding with the offensive on this 1.6 million populated, densely populated city. Do you see that happening, and why or why not?
Well, we have to remind your viewers that actually the Rafah crossing has been problematic for a long time, because Egypt is ruled by basically a pro-US military government that has been cooperating with Israel. It's also been installing people who have control of that crossing and who are charging vast amounts of money, making money from the suffering to allow people out. So this has always been a problematic border. Effectively, the Gaza Strip has been a prison camp, a massive prison camp. And I'm reminded after the International Court of Justice judgment at the end of last week, demanding that the Israelis stay out of Rafah, stop attacking Rafah, and then the Israelis just carry on. I'm reminded of the United States peace movement, millions of people involved there during the Vietnam War, chanting, Vietnam, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Because it's almost as if this is a race for Netanyahu and the Greater Israel bloc ruling Israel to kill as many innocent people as they can in order to really distract attention from the fact that they are not really legitimate rulers, that their own people, many of them, are protesting in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv against Netanyahu's tactics, saying that there must be negotiation to get their loved ones, hostages, free. And so he's really under attack from all sides, Netanyahu, which is why he's lashing out, I think, in this way. And quite clearly, this is a nation, a rogue nation of lawlessness. They're not interested in obeying any rules of the world. I mean, remember back in the 1930s, we had a similar power that was so arrogant that it felt that it was okay to just go and invade Czechoslovakia, Poland, eventually the whole of Europe. So something needs to be done to the Israelis at a very fundamental level in order to stop this getting worse. Because if it's not stopped now, we're going to end up with another Hitler that's just deciding to invade whichever country they want in order to stay in power. We're seeing, you know, the exact parallel with the idea of the Untermensch in World War II. They were called the Gypsies and the Communists and the Jews by the Nazis. And now, of course, it's anybody that's not a Zionist who is in this Gaza prison camp of all faiths and none, Christians as well, which seems to be being ignored by most of the world. And we're seeing a horrific form of human sacrifice, which is actually rather like the Old Testament days when you had the Canaanites and the Phoenicians, who it was part of their culture to kill the firstborn children of their families. And this is what we're seeing now is this is actually human sacrifice, I think, going on now in the modern world, which is pretty horrifying. But anyway, this is happening now because most of the people, almost all but a few, and those precious, precious few that can actually remember fighting the Nazis back in the Second World War, they're mostly dead, and so they've gone from our community memory. So I think we need to make sure we understand what is happening now, the comparisons to World War II, to make sure it doesn't repeat itself.
Thank you, Tony. And Sakina, to Tony's point, how do you calculate the Egyptians into this whole thing? Because everything Tony said about the Egyptian military and the government in Cairo was 100% accurate. But given that, we had some across the Rafah border, so an exchange of fire a few days ago. You very well know an Egyptian soldier was killed. Cairo has now deployed tanks and infantry to that border. Does the world not see this as a powder keg? If you do not care about the women and children, the 1.5 million that food is being used as a weapon of war against them, medicine is being used as a weapon of war against them, which are all illegal under the rules of engagement. If you don't want to consider that, to put, you know, if you're one of Israel's allies or anyone that has leverage to get Tel Aviv to lift the closure or the siege on that border crossing, then why not at least entertain the fact that this could lead to, between the two of your pseudo-allies, could lead to an escalation of conflict with the Egyptians?
I mean, Egypt is completely compromised. Egypt does not have autonomy in reality. It is being ruled from Washington. So I don't think that even if they wanted to change anything, they have the capacity to really intervene. I mean, if we look at the fact that, you know, the bases, the US bases, I mean, the amount of aid that is going to Egypt. Egypt is not an independent country. It may look like that, but it is obviously being ruled from Washington, and therefore they found themselves to be completely compromised, unable to do anything. And really, I mean, at the moment, you know, I think every nation has it on its own conscience to ask itself, any country that still has any kind of relationship, supports Israel in any manner, this is the time for them to really look within themselves and ask themselves, you know, what kind of a country are they? What kind of a world are they taking us into? I mean, we've seen the ruling from ICC. We have seen United Nations speak, you know, resolution after resolution. We have seen a message from ICJ. Israel does not want to listen to anyone. It's a rogue state. And this is a danger that is not just limited to Palestine. After Palestine, Egypt, that is at the moment, you know, in cohorts with the US, it's going to be the next one. Syria is going to be next. So all those Arab countries would think that by siding with the US, that they are protecting themselves. They are actually bringing this about themselves. The atrocities we see happening in Palestine will soon move on, and we will see the same in the rest of the Arab countries. So I think, you know, this really is a time now for every nation, in particular those around Israel, but any country around the world, if they have any kind of relationship, they have embassies, they got trading, you know, relationship with Israel. If they do not stop it now, I think, you know, this will be a world which we really will have to question whether we want to even be living in this world or not.
Good point, Sakina. And Tony, final thoughts with you. What are we as the world to do at this point? Tony, you have the ICJ that ruled toward an immediate halt. They gave a verdict for the regime to immediately halt its offensive into Rafah. You had the Oval Office, you had London, Paris, you had Berlin, all opposed to a Rafah offensive before it even happened. They all told Tel Aviv not to go through with it. It's going to look really bad on the West, it's going to look bad on you. It's something you're never really going to be able to recover from if you are the regime. And not to mention, it's going to leave a lot of the 30,000 plus people, 35,000 dead. It's only going to probably double that number by the time the Israelis are done. So when the occupation army listens to no one, Tony, and pushes through with this offensive and now with the seizure to starve out the women and children of Rafah, what, Tony, is the world to do at this point?
Well, I'm afraid I don't have any particularly good news from Britain, because tomorrow we don't have any elected MPs left. They've all disappeared for over a month. They will be disappearing, and Britain will be being ruled and run by King Charles and by David Cameron. So we will have some form of, obviously, Foreign Office, but these MPs are no longer MPs, and so this is, it's not just King Charles that's going to be running Britain. It's also the military, of course, and so they have a kind of a free hand, and I'm a little bit concerned, because Britain has been so vociferous in support of Netanyahu and the Israelis that we don't have any checks and balances on that support whatsoever. Right at the very start of all this, in the King's speech, Charles condemned Hamas, and he's made no statements really about the genocide whatsoever. So it's a bit worrying that Britain seems to be still carrying on and supporting this. And this new government, which looks like it will arrive on the scene in July, led by Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, is not just Starmer. He's really just a puppet for three very dangerous figures. One of them is Tony Blair. We all remember him. He's very active behind the scenes, controlling this new Labour Party, as well as Peter Mandelson, who was he was actually known by journalists because he got journalists sacked that he didn't agree with, as the Prince of Darkness. He was also a very powerful and corrupt figure within the Labour Party. In fact, he got removed as a member of Parliament for corruption, as well as Alistair Campbell, who was the guy who altered the legal dossier on the Iraq War. And so he was also implicated in the death of the British government scientist David Kelly at the time of the Iraq War, who was blowing the whistle on the Iraq War, the illegal Iraq War, by the way. So these people are going to be behind Keir Starmer, helping run Britain. And it almost looks to me as if we've got the possibility of a war government being installed in Britain in July. It may be that they make some positive changes here domestically, but internationally, they're a very dangerous lot. It seems to me. And what we've got the world starting to divide, with various countries throwing out their Israeli ambassadors. It looks to me as if a potential scenario for a third world war, I'm afraid. I don't think that the Israelis are stopping anytime soon. And we've also had, in the last few days, these two attacks on these Russian early warning radars by the Ukrainians. Now, this is a red rag to a bull. They're not even involved, these radars, in the Ukraine war. So the Russians are looking at this and seeing this as an attack by NATO. They're now considering, I've no doubt, in Moscow, the possibility of taking up some of the NATO early warning nuclear radars. And so I'm afraid I disagree with our friend that we've just heard from. I don't think they're going to be backing off. I think this is only going to be more and more compounding but doubling down really on the crimes that have been pointed out by the various world courts.
And that is very unfortunate, but nevertheless, thank you both for joining us on the program here. Sakina Datu there and Tony Gosling joining us from London and Bristol.